Welcome to the Calm Cockpit, where today we will navigate the turbulent world of anxiety. We'll welcome Sarah Gilbert to the show, who will share her powerful story of overcoming severe anxiety and her expertise in mind-body stress reduction training. She's going to share her journey as well as tools for helping us manage inevitable daily anxiety, and will also guide us all through a simple, science-backed breathing exercise designed to calm the mind and body.
If you're a pilot looking for practical ways to manage anxiety, or just looking for another tool to sharpen your edge before the check ride or recurrent training, this episode is for you.
The Calm Cockpit podcast starts now.
Onyx 1-2 Mike Oscar, runway 27, clear for takeoff.
Welcome, everybody, to today's episode. I'm Gita Brown, a midlife student pilot and licensed yoga and meditation educator with over 30 years of experience teaching high performers how to improve their lives without adding stress.
And I'm John Niehaus, corporate pilot and professional flight instructor.
I am so happy to be welcoming Sarah Gilbert to the show in a little bit. But first, I wanted to just say that this is one of those like dream come true moments where John and I talked about forming this podcast. We talked about creating this curated list of experts within the field of aviation, but also people who are adjacent or even far removed from aviation, and bringing them into the fold with their expertise so that we can dive into these topics like reducing anxiety and give you not only the actionable tools, but like access to these people who have this wealth of knowledge that you can start using today. Like we do all of our interviews, John and I are going to chat a little bit about what is anxiety exactly? What does it look like? And especially why should we care as pilots? Then you'll hear the interview with Sarah. And then at the back end, John and I will come back and give you the key takeaways. And I'm also going to share a little bit of scientific backing of how you can take the practice that Sarah is going to teach us and really put it into this power-packed practice that you can start using today and make it your own personal anxiety-busting toolkit. So I'm so excited for this episode. Yay!
All of us experience anxiety at some point in our lives. It's just part of being alive. The National Institute of Mental Health has research showing that a third of U.S. adolescents and adults will experience anxiety at some point in their life. You may know it as a feeling you get when you're really nervous, probably before a check ride or a big test that you might have. It's that sort of racing of your heart. Your hands might shake. You might shiver just a little bit. Maybe you're tossing and turning at night. Some people just feel it as general nervousness or restlessness, maybe even just a little bit tense. So we'll talk a little bit more about that and some techniques on how to maybe alleviate just a little bit or just take the edge off. So hopefully it'll help give you some suggestions to think about.
I love that idea of taking the edge off, because so many times for me as a yoga teacher and also then teaching musicians, students have like an all or nothing thing with anxiety. They either think they have it and it's horrible, or they don't have it and it doesn't affect them at all. And I think that most of us humans, we're wired for anxiety. We know that it's part of our neuroprotective system to alert us to danger in our environment. But I think what's really important to know is, how do we know two things? Number one, when is the anxiety tipping the scales towards really reducing our performance or affecting our personal health? That's number one. We need to be able to identify that, and it's going to look different for each person. And then number two, do we have self-care strategies to address the anxiety that we all experience with being alive and to work with it skillfully and mindfully? I think it's really important for pilots to be aware of it, because for me as a teacher, I can't think of a student I've ever taught who at some point hasn't exhibited signs that their anxiety is getting in the way of their performance. The ones who do well are the ones who typically are aware of it and have tools to manage it, rather than the ones who pretend like it's not happening to them. Those tend to be the ones who are really bossed around by it even more. because they're trying to outperform it. And then they create this stress and the perfectionism comes in. So self-awareness is key. Have you found that, John, that pilots, what's the vibe with the pilots out there in the professional community? Do they talk about it, acknowledge it? What's the vibe?
I think that we do talk about it, but I think we talk about it in different ways. I don't think we always label it as anxiety. I think it's, sometimes it's labeled as that gut feeling. Sometimes it's labeled as, the generic stress that comes with what we do. So it's not always about like, oh, I'm anxious about this. It's, ooh, I had this really stressful flight. I'm going to this difficult airport. And so we get around actually having to say the A word. And I think that sometimes, and we'll cover this as well, sometimes a little bit of that nervousness, a little bit of that anxiety is actually a good thing. It does keep you sharp. If you're not a little bit nervous about something that is complicated and potentially dangerous or difficult, then maybe you're not taking it as seriously as you should be. And so I think that, again, it's about understanding that it's a natural thing and that people do have certain things that they might be anxious or nervous about, but using it as a tool to make you sharper, make you a little bit better without letting it control you, as you kind of previously mentioned. So there is that balance. And for pilots, we're no different than anybody else. A little bit is good, a lot, not always as good.
Just a little background on Sarah. So I've known Miss Sarah Gilbert, who is our illustrious guest today, I think for about 14 years or so. You'll hear in the podcast about the journey. I met her because I began teaching her daughter, Macy, yoga for all abilities. It was called Yoga for the Special Child. So forgive me if sometimes I call it by either name, but Yoga for All Abilities. And Sarah watched Macy and I train in yoga for years and then eventually realized maybe there's something to that, and began doing yoga herself. Before Sarah ever had Macy, though, she was in business management. She worked at that for 8 years at a commercial real estate firm in Boston before she had children. And then she had her kids. Now they're both out of the house and she's back working full time again. She works in a middle school, supporting staff and students in every capacity you can imagine because she's wonderful and she does all the things. She is now a licensed Yoga for All Abilities practitioner, and she is also certified in Yoga Spirit. And Yoga for All Abilities, for those who don't know, is a therapeutically oriented yoga practice. And we are licensed, which means we have to keep up our recurrent training just like pilots. To me, it's one of the gold standards of training in yoga, because unlike a lot of certifications where you get your license or your certification, then you just go off, in Yoga for All Abilities, we have to keep up our recurrent training. And that means we have our pros having our eyes on us, making sure we're offering real quality. And I think you'll see that in the breathing practice she teaches us. It's simply amazing. So anything else, John, or shall we launch into our discussion with Sarah?
I think let's talk to Sarah.
Great. Welcome, Miss Sarah Gilbert, to the Calm Cockpit.
Thank you.
We are so happy that you're here today to share your story of anxiety and to really destigmatize this topic and bring it out into the open. And I'm especially excited because for me, I've been able to watch you grow. I think we've known each other well over a decade now. And I've seen the development that you've made in talking about anxiety, finding techniques for it, using all of your available resources. And then I've watched you turn it into a superpower where now you actually teach and help other people how to manage their anxiety, which is really like the whole point of the podcast, is to take all of these stories and give them to other people into actionable strategies so we can improve our life. So we're just going to dive right into the anxiety pool. Let's rip off the Band-Aid. What did it look like and feel like for you before you had a label? Because I think a lot of people have it, but they actually might not even know that they have it. Was that your experience?
100%. It wasn't until well into adulthood, after becoming a mom, that I really realized that I had anxiety, and that I've probably had anxiety for a majority of my life. But when I was growing up, anxiety was never a word I'd never heard that word. No idea what it was or why I felt so nervous all the time. As a kid, I moved around a lot with my dad's job, and that was really stressful. But identifying that stress and my parents being able to identify that stress in me to be able to help me just didn't exist. It wasn't anything that was talked about or recognized. But I did have, I had insomnia even as a kid because I had such strong worries about grades and about making friends when I would move to a new town or things like that. But I just sort of lived with it and I just sort of dealt with it. And I just, went on about my life. And then once I became a mom and specifically a mom of a child who was born with some pretty significant special needs, is when my anxiety kind of went over the top. I mean, not only the physical symptoms became unmanageable.
I think you have a really good point that often gets glossed over. It's a little bit generational. Like, so you and I are Gen X. John, I think, do you qualify as a millennial?
Yeah, I'm the elder millennial. It's that weird sort of gap that they're starting to call Zennials, where we're sort of Gen X, but also millennials, because I remember time before the internet and cell phones and all of that stuff.
Right. Okay. So this is interesting because Sarah and I grew up at that time where this mental health stuff and like saying the A word, the anxiety word, it was not a thing. It was like, what do they say? We're raised on hose water and neglect. Like, suck it up, buttercup, right? You were told to like tough it out, suck it up. What's wrong with you? John, maybe your generation had a little bit more awareness of this.
It was like the more challenges that were thrown at you, the better off you would be.
Right.
Yes.
Which is true, but not having any coping mechanisms for sometimes when the challenge is too strong or too big and you don't know how to manage it.
It sounds like if you're moving around all the time with your family and then as a kid having insomnia, now that would be a bit of a red flag. We'd hope for some kids to receive some coping mechanisms from a therapist or a counselor or someone at school. So I just wanted to highlight that because I'm sure we have pilots who are much older listening to this as well. I look at my mom's generation and she's like, what is anxiety? Like, it's even more far removed for the baby boomer generation, and our elders even older than that. So I think it's really interesting to see how generationally it shifts a little bit. So can you talk just a tiny bit more about before you had kids and before it exploded? You said you had insomnia. What else? What were the other like things that now you look back, you're like, oh, that was anxiety. And if I had learned in 5th grade how to handle it, maybe it wouldn't have then caught on fire.
So the feeling of just these uncontrollable racing thoughts that you could never slow down or organize or be able to stop. I also had this insatiable need for perfectionism. I had to be perfect at everything. Everything had to be, kind of in order. I would try to predict the outcome of something that made me nervous because then maybe I could control what was happening in the moment so that the outcome would be just what I needed it to be to feel better or to feel good about it. Physically though, like I'd have sweaty palms. My heart would race. I get this feeling in my stomach of like not like a good butterflies, like when you're falling in love and you have butterflies in your stomach. It was like so many butterflies that it would make me feel nauseous. It would give me this like churning feeling in my stomach of just such unease and discomfort. And what I now know to be my nervous system is what was really just completely backfiring and just shooting throughout my entire body, which would cause all of these sweaty palms and the racing thoughts and the feeling that I needed to just control everything, which I now know is impossible. So those were, and yeah, the insomnia, I would sleepwalk. I'd have crazy dreams.
Wow. So it sounds like it's a very double-edged sword, isn't it? Because as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, okay, a kid like you, even college students who might be listening to this in the classroom, they might present as very organized, together, forward thinking. I'm thinking of a pilot. You want to have a little bit of that perfectionism. You want to strive for that. You want to be organized. You want to think ahead. You want to be on that sort of level of alertness. So a student like you might in class appear to be highly competent, to be organized, disciplined, forward, like all the good things, but inside probably so dysregulated that you're one life stressor away from total implosion.
Yes.
So it's such a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because I'm sure there are pilots, particularly I'm thinking of collegiate pilots out there, who are having success externally, but internally their anxiety is getting to a point that it's unmanageable.
I've been there. I know exactly how that feels.
Oh, tell us more, John.
I mean, we've talked about it before, but you never, in my case, you can never really be prepared for sort of that first type rating, that first intense training that you go through. You're away from home. Your career depends on being perfect in some cases. Even though they don't always expect you to be, in your mind you go, well, if I'm not perfect, I'm not going to get this job, or I'm going to fail. And if I fail, the whole rest of my career is over. And, you know, I haven't talked too much about this, but I was able to get through it at the risk of my own health, I think. And I remember I was on reserve. So I finished training in either October or November. And then I was on reserve in Chicago through Christmas, and that was my first Christmas completely away from home by myself, stressed out like you wouldn't believe, and absolutely hating everything. Even though in my head I'm going, this is everything you ever wanted. Why are you upset? I did come back eventually, and we did family Christmas, and I just was not myself. And I couldn't figure out why. And like you said, it was one more life decision away from just complete implosion. And I've talked to my AME years later, not about this, but just in general, because he came in and did a presentation for our flight department on mental health. And he even mentioned the fact that there's a difference between issues that you need to kind of deal with regularly and then this buildup of stress and anxiety to where you snap. And it's not a medical disqualifier, but it is something that, you know, should something happen or you get to feel like you're experiencing that you have to deal with, especially as a pilot. So luckily, I don't think I got to that point, but I kind of walked right up to the edge, and that was sort of the catalyst for me going, I need to find something else to do. So I know exactly how you feel.
Anxiety is like this slow burn, and it's like you get used to it, right, Sarah? Like that's just the way things are. Yeah, it becomes normal. I remember talking to you once about it, that like, because I've experienced anxiety in my own life as well. Like, who hasn't? Come on. But in my moments of trying to be hyper controlling and worrying about all the things, thinking that other people were crazy because they weren't worrying as much as I was. Like, and now I look back, I'm like, oh no, I was trying to control an uncontrollable situation and wondering why everyone else wasn't getting themselves in this hyper alert state. Now I look back, I'm like, oh, because they were wiser than I was. So you had this for a long time then. What age were you, if I may ask, then when you had kids and it really started to get to that tipping point?
Yeah.
How old were you?
I had my son when I was 30. I was anxious, I guess, in a new parent anxious kind of way, just because it was new and different and overwhelming and exciting and, you know, all the things, all the emotion. And then I got pregnant with our daughter, who is now 19. So I was 32 or 33 at the time. And she was born into a body with Down syndrome. So needless to say, it was, you know, kind of turned our worlds upside down. That was sort of the beginning of the big spiral of my anxiety, because I had my 2-year-old son at the time, and then this new baby with all these challenges that my husband and I didn't know how to handle. And so when Macy was about 18 months old, I believe, right around there, 2 years old, I started to have these symptoms that were more than anxiety. It was more than I had ever felt before in my life. It was, my heart raced. My heart just like raced out of my chest. I was jittery. I was very, very shaky all the time. Like I had these tremors. I was losing crazy amounts of weight. I was a complete insomniac. And I had this uncontrollable fear. And this is kind of a harsh reality, but it was my reality at the time, that my daughter was going to die. I thought Macy was going to die. Every day I woke up and I thought, oh my God, I have to take care of her. It is my sole responsibility to keep this child alive. And for whatever reason, I just didn't think she was going to. So I had that pressure on myself on top of everything else. So I lived with that, all of those feelings unexplained for a long time. I don't remember how long, but it was probably a good 8 to 12 months that I lived with that. I went in for my yearly physical, and thank God for my doctor. She said, has anybody ever told you that you have an enlarged thyroid? And I was like, no. What does that mean? And so she sent me for an ultrasound and blood work, and it came about that I had this autoimmune disease called Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune hyperthyroid disease that caused all of those extra symptoms that I was feeling that made me feel so awful. So I have to say I was kind of relieved to know what was causing all of this and that it could be managed through medicine, because my thyroid was overproducing thyroxine, the thyroid hormone. And so through medicine, I could manage that and level myself back out. So easier said than done. But I did over time. I went on the thyroid medicine. I got some medicine to help me sleep again, which was a godsend, because when you're anybody who doesn't have adequate sleep is no good in my book. Sleep is so crucially important. Never mind being a new mom and having with a 2-year-old and at the time, a 2 and a 4-year-old. So, and I always wondered what caused my thyroid to go so wacky and start overproducing this and causing, wreaking havoc on my body. Most people I asked, doctors and therapists, and agreed that it was probably stress and anxiety induced. And so that really was very shocking and eye-opening to me. I had lived with so much stress and anxiety that it then was, really physically harming my body from the inside out. So into an autoimmune disease that and now it's totally managed and under control, but I will be taking medicine for the rest of my life to manage my thyroid.
Wow.
All because, I needed to better manage and be aware of my stress and anxiety.
I think we sometimes think of stress and anxiety of being like this mental thing that's like, oh, it just like exists in our head. Like it's this amorphic thing. And we completely forget that every thought you have is like a neurochemical reaction, and it creates a chain reaction throughout the body that, as you said, you can see in the shoulders and in the heart. And I'm thinking of little young Sarah in 4th grade moving around and experiencing already insomnia, racing thoughts, all of those years of those stress hormones pumping through the body at that elevated level. No wonder then you go through having childbirth, huge hormonal shift in the body as well as physical overt changes. Then very soon after that, a couple of years later, you have your beautiful daughter. Woo! And then the stress and anxiety of her being born into a body with a developmental disability that you don't really know where she's going to fall on that spectrum of ability to walk and talk and feed herself. You're waiting for all of that. Like, no wonder. But also I get chills when you say that they're telling you now that autoimmune, was it Graves' disease, is that low-level stress caused that. I think that's like a huge wake-up call, because again, it's not this abstract, you're just experiencing it in the mental realm. It's just stress. It just exists as this thing. It actually got wired into your body. So was that rock bottom?
I mean, prior to that diagnosis, it was rock bottom, because I was like literally out of my mind. My husband didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I was. I was just hanging on by a thread. So once I got my thyroid kind of managed, that's where I started to take some yoga classes. You have to start somewhere. So that's where I started. And through that, then fast forward a little bit, then Macy met Gita.
A joyful moment in my life. Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. Ours too. I mean, look where we are now. Look how far we've come.
Yeah.
And it was really coincidental by happenstance that we met Gita. But thank God it all happened. And so I was looking for music therapy for my daughter. So they started doing music therapy together, which then shortly thereafter morphed into a yoga practice. The benefits and the things that we saw in Macy through her practice with Gita and the connection that Macy was able to make with Gita was just the most beautiful thing. It was just like magical. And being in the state of mind that I was, it took me a little longer than it should have to realize that is what I also needed. And so I needed that kind of connection and discipline and things to help me kind of from the inside out to make myself better. And so that's kind of where my yoga journey started.
So the most important question is, have you tried stress relieving bed sheets? Because they plug into the wall.
John,
I've never even heard of such a thing.
this is actually a really great tangent because exactly as Sarah is saying, the change is from inside out, not outside in. And if you force an outside in change, it's usually temporary and you don't have the value of the internal wisdom for making choices that keep that change in place. So the way, even though I know, Sarah, you're like, well, it took me a long time to figure it out, but sometimes that's the best way. Suffering is such a great teacher.
Yes. Yeah.
We always say anxiety is a liar because it will tell you that you're worrying and your need for hyper control is protecting you and protecting other people. And it's what makes you awesome at what you do. And that's the really tricky thing. And that's why, for me, yoga has been so beneficial. Most people think that they know themselves well or they have good awareness, but most people, honestly, do not. Because it's actually a skill that we have to train. We're trained at thinking. We're not so well trained at observing with neutral compassion from above. That sort of meta, which is part of what meditation trains you to do, to actually observe what's going on, not what you think about what's going on. Most people are stuck in that thinking about what they're feeling, not observing it from a third place above. And Sarah, I know you were saying for you, that's part of what the yoga did. It's that inside out transition, which is what I'm talking about. I don't know if it was like this for you, Sarah, but for me, those initial days of diving deeper into yoga, going beyond sort of trendy postural yoga classes, when I actually got into the more traditional ones that really ask you to sit with what was uncomfortable, it was not a pleasant experience for me, those classes. Because you're literally looking at all the stuff that you're spending all day long achieving yourself into ignoring. What was your experience like when you first kind of dove into, hey, sit there with yourself? Was it easy, hard, blissful?
It's very uncomfortable and very hard.
So,
and just to note, I also did a lot of talk therapy, but having that weekend intentionally and very was really, really helpful because it allowed me to just sort of like, I'm going to teach you today the 3-part sort of like breath, vomit. And so the 3-part breath, it's known also churning in my mind and in my body the waterfall breath. It has a few different names. I could never really make sense of the 3-part breath. And it just allowed me to talk the 3 parts is that we're going to inhale more and through the nose, all while at the same time, and then managing the second part of the breath was at the point where I was, the breath, calming that all down as well. Lock it in. So having we're going to exhale through the nose, and I've done that off and on many times in my life. The mouth and lips closed, been invaluable the whole time. Yes, then going into inhale for a slow count of 4, profound, which as I lead you through the breath, I could have ever do that 3 times. And if you had told me even 3 years prior to me going to that basic one training at your own pace for yoga for all abilities, so we're going to inhale for a count of 4, be actually doing that and sitting in that room and taking that on, exhale for a slow it's just count that never would have even entered my mind. It's like it just was not to have but through Macy and Gita's practice longer from what I saw in Gita's introduction for me into that whole other world. So whatever really chair, however you're seated, it changed my life. But I want you to sink down heavy into the chair. Close your eyes. What I learned for you and what I still carry with me, and allow your hips to sink down into the chair. Is that right hip? It all starts inside here.
And then you're
because you have to want to do it.
Ground
you have
your
to be
feet
open
down
enough
into the
to do
floor.
it. You have to really open your mind and open your
Allow
heart
your
to
right
whatever is
heel
going to
to
come,
lift
so that you can
slightly
really
off the floor,
dive deep and
and then
feel
lower it
and
back down,
experience the
grounding your feet
change,
and your
no
right
matter
foot
how
into the floor.
uncomfortable or scary
And
or
then
glorious,
raising
however
your
it's going to
left
feel
heel off the
inside.
floor,
And I can't even
slightly
pinpoint the moment when it
lowering
when
that heel
everything
back
kind of
down
shifted,
into
and I
the
was
floor
like,
so that you feel nice and grounded.
oh,
While at
this
the
is
same
what,
time
this is what
lengthening
Gita
your
and
spine
Shiva
so that you're
Kami,
sitting
our
up
teacher and guru
tall.
and mentor, talks about.
So you're grounding down through your feet and your
the start
hips
of what
while
that is.
rising up
because
through
there's
your
a shift, but
spine,
the shift just continues and
relaxing
continues and
your
continues.
shoulders
To get deeper, the more you
so
allow
that there's
it
no
to,
tension in your shoulders,
within
and resting
yourself.
your palms.
It's a very, very,
on your
very
legs,
personal
on
journey.
your
No
knees,
two journeys
wherever
are
it's
similar,
most comfortable.
but it's so profound. And then by
And as
teaching
you're
is a whole
breathing,
other level of
just take
experiencing
notice of
the
your
depth
breath. You
of
don't have to change
yoga
your breath,
and
you
what
don't
it can
have
do
to
for people, and
judge
how
your
you can
breath.
see it then work
Just
for other
notice
people
how you're breathing
in
and
the
how
same
your
way it
body
worked for
is
me.
moving.
So one thing that
While
I
you
think a lot of
breathing.
people don't know about
Take
these more
notice
traditional
of
forms
on your
of yoga,
inhale,
and it's
how
also
your
what we find a
abdomen
lot too in the Taoist longevity
protrudes
practices,
out,
like
extend
Qigong and Tai
out.
Chi, is that the structures of the
Maybe
class
on your
themselves are
exhale, your
designed to lead you
abdomen
from the
contracts,
outside
or
in,
your belly button kind of
and
sinks
that all
back
of those
down towards your
pieces fit
spine
together so beautifully so that
slightly.
each person trying the class can find the
So
part
you're
of class they love the
inhaling
most.
as your abdomen
What was the secret sauce for
goes
you
out,
that you think, number one, helped you,
exhaling
your nervous
as your
system to
abdomen
shift out
contracts
of
back in.
fight, flight, or flee,
And
and
maybe now
into a
you're
more
noticing
restful
that your
state?
breath is
And then what
slowing
are the
down.
practices that are like your back pocket tools that you're like,
Good. And now
so what was
let's
like the most
practice
healing aspect for you on that
the
internal level?
three-part
And then
breath.
what was like a tool?
So as you prepare
use
your body
still?
for your next
The part of
inhale,
the
your
practice
lips
that
are closed,
really positively
your
affected
teeth
me
and
the
your
most
jaw
and
are
allowed
not
me
clenched.
to really bring me that
Relax
calm
your
and
jaw.
peace and a shift was through the breath.
And as you
Pranayama.
inhale for
It
a slow
was
count of
a
4,
game changer
1,
for me. And
2,
it's the part
3,
of the class
4,
that
and then
that
hold
just
your
really
breath.
touched me the
1,
most. There are many
2,
different types of
3,
breathing exercises, many
4,
different
and
ways
then
that you
slowly
can
exhale
access
through your
the
nose
breath
to
and
a
use the
slow
breath.
count of
But it's
6,
as simple as breathing.
2,
It's as
3,
simple yet as
4,
complicated
5,
as just
6.
breathing in and out.
Good. And then
The
begin again
difference
by
is
inhaling
the mindfulness and the
to a
intention that
slow
you
count of
have
4,
when you're breathing, and your focus on
holding your
what
breath
is
for a
happening
slow
with your
count of
body
4,
while you're breathing. Again, it's something that takes lots
and then
and lots
slowly
and lots of
exhaling
practice,
to a count of
because
6.
as you practice your breathing becomes even more and
Good.
more
And then I'll
beneficial.
leave this next
At least
round or
that's my own
2
personal
up to you,
story.
using your
So,
own
my
counting
back pocket
at your
tool
own
is my
pace.
breath. I mean, because we all
Inhaling,
we all breathe all the time, no matter where we are, no matter what's happening.
locking that breath
And
in,
there are simple
holding the
breathing
breath,
exercises that you can do in a moment where you're feeling,
and then
where you need to kind
slowly
of recenter
exhaling.
and regroup, or calm
Fully
yourself
and
down before
completely.
you're going to enter into a stressful meeting, or you're going to
Good.
get in the
And then we'll
cockpit
do
and do your
one
first
more
solo flight,
round.
or you're going to
Inhale,
anything. And for any reason at all. And so
hold,
I have a couple of breathing exercises that I
and
use
exhale.
particularly for myself that really help daily, multiple times a day. But it's that over time and lots of practice
And now
where I can catch
noticing
myself in the moment
how your body
now.
feels.
And
At this point, after doing
it
a few
hasn't
rounds
been
of
that long,
intentional,
really, in the grand scheme of it all.
mindful
I
breathing,
immediately can feel the anxiety, or if I'm in the middle
if
of
your
that
eyes
anxious
are
feeling, and I'll go,
closed,
oh,
I
don't
invite
think
you
so.
to
I'm
slowly
going to nip this
flutter
in the
your
bud,
eyes
and I'm going to
open.
clear and intentional about whatever it is that I'm doing in that moment.
Bring your
Does that make
shoulders
sense?
up to your
Absolutely.
ears.
So you go through all
And
of
then
this, and along the
roll
way,
them
like
down
you're
and
now
back.
certified to like teach other people. Like you have like a shiny
Good.
license to be like, here's a child, a
Beautiful.
child with special needs. Teach them yoga.
Hopefully you
Like
notice
that's
a
a huge
little difference
responsibility.
in the way your
But
body feels.
now you're going to teach us a breathing practice in
Slower
a little
and
bit, but I'd
calmer.
love to hear a little bit now.
More
You said
peaceful.
earlier, you're someone who has anxiety. You have a superpower to see other people who have anxiety. So you work in the public schools. What do you see in other people that gives you like little cues that some anxiety behaviors are going on that are maybe different than how they presented for you, so we can sort of better identify ourselves or other people anxious patterns?
I just notice it. I notice how I work in a middle school. So talk about prime age for puberty and hormones and outward appearance and wanting everybody to like you, but you don't even really like yourself and you don't know what to do in your awkward body. And so I see anxiety in the middle school in many different ways. A lot of extra movement, picking or leg shaking, leg tapping, under the table, or twirling their hair, or staring off into space, or just this deer in headlight, but they don't even realize it. So there are lots of different ways anxiety can present itself.
So before you teach us a breathing practice, anything that we missed about anxiety, or if you had like one thing to tell, if you had one thing to tell, like someone like John, who is on that first job and they're going, I'm losing my mind. What would you say to those people who are out there right now feeling like this is an issue, but they want to shift? If you had like, your top tip.
First, I would say you have to want to shift. You have to want it for yourself. If it's something that's, inhibiting you or making you not be able to be in the present moment and really enjoy your life as it was, that was a big aha for me, was that, like you just said, Gita, I was always thinking about the past and worrying about the future and not just being right here and right now, which I know sounds very cliche and it's kind of an overused, thought process, but it's so true. And it's just so important. Just do something for yourself that's going to make yourself feel better. Take the time, give yourself the permission that it's okay to take the time to slow down and just do something for yourself that's going to, make your life better. It doesn't have, this whole world is so go, 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 and the schedule. And we have to, the busier we are, the better. Like I have shifted so far away from that, where I now know how to say, no, I don't want to take that on. I don't want to do that because I want to preserve myself and I don't want my anxiety to flare because I said yes to too many things. And if there's any way that I can prevent myself from feeling that way, I'm going to do it. And it's okay. It's totally okay to do that, to preserve yourself and your sanity and your mental health.
Well, I think first and foremost, I appreciate you sharing the stories because it's definitely a lesson for people. And I think there's a lot of people out there that maybe aren't quite down that path to that level of anxiety. But I think, it's something that we all encounter. No matter who you are or what you do, you're going to have a certain level of anxiety on a regular basis, and it spikes every now and again, and you just kind of hope it goes down. And I think the lesson is that it's not something that you have to wait until you have catastrophic failure. You can address as you feel it. And taking it from the pilot perspective, back to the whole idea of clearing your mind and all of these things. Well, why does this podcast exist? Well, the podcast exists because we talked about the idea that there are distractions in your life, in your mind, in your body that keep you from doing the best level of activity that you have. And certainly, we're trying to avoid the whole idea of perfectionism, but as pilots, it's darn near impossible. So if I'm going to give somebody a carrot to try to take up something like this, like the breathing techniques that you're about to tell us and some of the encouragement to deal with some of the anxiety issues that we might have, think of how much those are blocking your abilities. If you think that you are good now, if you think that you can shoot, in our case, an approach down to minimums during bad weather and high crosswinds, think of how much better you could do if your anxiety level or stress level were reduced. If you weren't worried about what the guy next to you or girl next to you is thinking. I'm hand flying. Do they think I'm good? Do they think I'm maintaining the preferences? I don't care. if we get on the ground and everything's safe and we're within, the limits of what we're supposed to be doing, then that's really what matters. And so again, back to the pilots, this whole idea of how do we give you the carrots to be better, to prep your toolbox to be the best pilot that you can be, and hopefully have it carry over into your regular life. I think that this is a extremely important conversation, and I'm looking forward to kind of your tips and techniques on the breathing side too.
You're so right, John. So much mental energy goes when you have dysregulated stress and anxiety. And we get used to it being there, but we don't consider how much it's draining our capacity to grow even more and enjoy what we're doing. Don't have to be great at something and be a complete stress monkey at the same time. You can be great and actually be relaxed and happy, and that's a good thing. That's kind of why I'm here on this podcast, to shift that conversation out of like strict control and domination and into actually ease and comfort can be synonymous with high performance outcomes.
And I look at it as if you're operating at 80% because 20% of your brain is thinking about other things, and you can get tips to even steal another 10%, you're going to be that much better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So shall we breathe?
Let's breathe.
I mean, hopefully, I think we are, but
I know we should. Yes, exactly. Let's intentionally breathe.
Very good. I'm ready.
All right. I have to remember that this isn't that I have to teach it to people who aren't watching it.
Yes.
So I am going to close my eyes. That will help me do that.
Okay.
And I invite anybody who's listening to also close your eyes so that you can sort of get rid of the external distraction.
Thank you. I can imagine doing that for 5 minutes before a check ride would be super beneficial. Have you ever done anything like that before, John?
A little bit. We've mentioned it before, but I do have the subscription to that Calm app, and they do some of the breathing techniques too. And yeah, I mean, that was great. I feel really relaxed. And it's funny because as pilots, we tend to be a fairly conservative crowd, right? I don't need yoga. I don't need this. I don't need that. And I'm sure there's some people out there that maybe that's actually true. But, again, like you said, going into a check ride, going into a difficult day where there's bad weather, or maybe you're climbing into an airplane that yesterday had a maintenance issue and everybody says it's fixed, but nobody really knows. Why not try something that gives you that extra edge, that gives you that clarity and focus? And I think that what I'm going to do for those of you listening is I'm also going to cut what we just did out and then put it as its own unique bonus content, so that next time you don't have to search for it. If you found it beneficial the first time, then we'll just have it kind of as its own unique piece. And Sarah, I thank you for doing that for us.
Of course.
Yes.
I do have one question for both of you. And again, this kind of comes back to the Calm app, and the reason why it comes up is because I actually saw a commercial for it while we were watching a TV show the other day. And Calm has started doing these commercials where it's nothing but a certain kind of noise. There's the green noise, and I guess there's pink, and there's different colors. Obviously, we all know what white noise is. Do you find that pairing up something like what we just did with one of those kinds of noise, whatever color it might be, is that an effective technique, or is that more showy? Is that just something that's kind of the talk of the town right now?
I actually do in the right moment. The frequencies of those sounds, I haven't really done a lot of research on it. I do know that brown noise is one that works for me. White noise makes my anxiety creep in.
I don't like that either.
Yeah, but there is something to be said for that kind of noise. It's like Krishna Das, who is, who I listen to all the time. He has his album where he chants, and Gita should speak more to him or about him, but he has music that stays very level and there isn't like a beginning of of the chant in the tempo and the music, and then it goes up and then it comes back down, and then it's just very consistent and calm with a rhythm that just allows you to kind of get into the swing of it.
My 2 cents. So with the Krishna Das thing, I think that album is called, he's a kirtan artist, which is a call and response chant, original to India. And he's one of the foremost artists in that. I believe it's Piece of My Heart. And
Yes,
the whole thing is at about 60 beats per minute. So it's a very slow, sedative pace. And the idea is that you can do a yoga practice to it, and it's never going to get jarring or interrupt you or, take you to an aroused nervous system state. It's a wonderful thing to have on in the background. With regards to your question, John, though, with the noises, what I can say, 2 functions of that. Number 1, if I'm in a very noisy environment and I'm overstimulated, like I was just at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, that's a place where if I was going to do one of these breathing practices and I was finding myself getting agitated by the noise, the earbuds go in, a sound like that goes on, and then I would do Sarah's breathing. Absolutely. As a means to mask noise that is overstimulating me, because I get overstimulated by too much noise. Hello, ATC radio calls, so not those, but the ones that don't apply to me. So with that, if you're using it to mask external noise that's distracting, great. However, I also challenge people to sometimes not always be fighting the outside world so much, because that's actually a short-term gain, but a long-term crutch. Our teacher, very often if there was noise in the environment, you weren't at this training, Sarah, but if there was noise in the environment, people would be like, oh, I wish they weren't vacuuming upstairs. She would go upstairs and tell them to make more noise. Because she said you want to be able to find your center and meditate and breathe, even if chaos is going on around you. She would say, plunk yourself down in the midst of the busiest, noisiest place and sit right there and breathe and meditate. Be the eye of the hurricane. That's how we train in our method. So not trying to block the external world. However, also to your point, John, those specific frequencies are designed to entrain your brain waves with certain frequencies, the theta, the beta, the alpha. What's the other one? I'm a little out of my realm of the brain science, but it's supposed to entrain your brain waves to different states of awareness and thought process. So yeah, like all of it, try it, see if it works for you. And some days it might. I always encourage people, just be natural, just be yourself, detach from needing all of these extra things. Your breath is the sound you should be listening to, because that gives us freedom instead of I need something else to help me feel calm. The whole idea is to be free of that thought, because that thought creates more anxiety. And if you don't have your app with you. So be free, breathe. Thank you, Miss Sarah Gilbert, for sharing your experiences, your wisdom, both your internal struggles, but then also your teacher expertise. I think it's so valuable to have these conversations and to share honestly what's going on, because I know there is somebody listening who's going through this themselves, or they're seeing it in someone they care about or work with, and hopefully giving them tools, ideas, avenues to explore, to know it does not have to be this way. And that you can actually do what you've done, which is actually turn it into a superpower and a strength. Because you seem like someone who you know yourself so well now that you're able to grow in new directions. Whereas if you had stayed stuck in that anxiety mode, you would still be growing. But to John's point, your potential would be somewhat limited. So I really appreciate you sharing this with all of our listeners. And I'm sure it's going to be great benefit to many. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, of course.
So pilots, what did you think? What did you like about the breathing practice? Did you like the breathing practice? I hope you did. I know that I kind of zenned out a little bit. I almost fell asleep. Now, granted, you don't necessarily want to do that while you're flying, but you might be able to at least do the relaxation part of it while you're flying. So if you're in prep for a difficult landing, difficult approach, and you've got time, maybe even in a crew environment. It might be a great way to just prepare yourself for the stress that might happen in the upcoming parts of the flight.
I loved listening to you right after it. You can actually hear in the recording that you're talking slower and you're all chilled out afterwards. It really, really does work. And I would also recommend, I felt like before we did it, we should have warned people, I hope you're not driving while you're doing this because it will calm you down. And it's a wonderful practice to use. I'm going to talk in a moment about ways to kind of pair it to make it like a very powerful practice and ways you can use it in your day. But very, very briefly, nutshell science, like this will be a whole episode at some point, but just the tiny little bits. When we do deep breathing like that, the most fundamental shift that's happening is we're going from that high use of your sympathetic nervous system, which can be related to that fight, flight, or freeze part, the really active part, or shifting then to your parasympathetic nervous system, which is what John was describing, that like almost asleep, but not really, kind of zenned out. And what's cool is they actually have the science now to determine why this is happening. There's a lot of interplay, but one of the primary things is that deep diaphragmatic breathing stimulates the vagus nerve. And that's just a big old long nerve that runs from your brainstem down to your gut. So when you're doing that deep diaphragmatic breathing, that innervates or activates that vagus nerve. And that helps give that bodily feedback that transmits messages from the body to the brain, which in turn then lowers the blood pressure, slows the heart rate, reduces muscle tension, and it also balances that oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in the blood. That's why we get that like chilled out, but yet we're still alert feeling, which is absolutely amazing. And then later we translate that into a subjective feeling of feeling less anxious, less stressed, less freaked out about life in general. So respiration like this can also entrain your electrical activity of your brain. So it can lead to this, if you do it and practice it a lot, to this sort of synchronicity or synchrony rather of brain waves. So it's allowing all those diverse regions of the brain. Think of your motor cortex, your language cortex, all of those diverse areas of your brain regions to communicate more effectively. That's why you get more clear thinking. And if you do regular breathing practices, what I found in my own life is that I start to make associations between lots of different things with a lot more clarity. And I feel like I see problems clearer. That's because I'm entraining my brain's electrical activity, and all of those areas of the brain can work together more effectively. What pilot doesn't want that? So that's just a little bit of science there. Now, what's really exciting for us pilots is they did lots and lots of studies on breathing, but I found one in particular that really supported how we can actually put Sarah's breathing practice into everyday life. And we're taking this out and we're going to make it into a separate bonus episode so you can start using it every day. So they did a meta-analysis of 72 different interventions from 58 different studies. It's a very robust study. I'll link it in the notes. And they found these key actionable takeaways for how to use this breathing practice. So you want to choose a breath pace that's slow. We did that. Check. You want to provide human-guided training, either live or recorded. You have that in the bonus episode. Check. Now, here's key for what we can do going forward, though. You want to have multiple sessions, if possible, every day. So 2 5-minute sessions a day is going to give you a lot more benefit than doing one session once a week for half an hour. So little sessions throughout the day over a long period of time will be very, very effective. It's actually really, really simple. Do small bits of practice every day with someone who knows what they're doing and can guide you in the proper technique, and you will receive the benefits of it. It's a physiological and physical inevitability that if you start to breathe in this manner, your physiology will shift, and then your mind follows suit very, very easily. We're going to put this in a bonus episode, like we said, practice it. I'd also recommend rather, if you want to pair it with something like the bonus episode we did on sleep, doing Sarah's bonus episode for breathing, and then go right on in and lay down in bed and pull up episode 7, which is one I did on a guided relaxation leading into sleep. You will be primed to have a deeper, more relaxing sleep because you've actually done the hard work of down regulating your nervous system before you fall asleep, which will make your sleep more deeper and more restorative. So I really hope you guys enjoyed listening to Sarah. We're hoping to have her back on the episode at another point because the breathing is just the tip of the iceberg of what she has trained in and what she can offer. But we really hope that you found that useful. Please do drop us an email at calmcockpit@gmail.com.
So we hope you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, fly smarter.
And stress less.
Boston Tower 1 departure is Airbus 321. Traffic holding crossing runway 33 left 3 lane.